Can you hear all right? Bill told me there's a little trouble with the microphone, so I'm a little deaf, and I have a habit of howling a little bit. I like to try to tell a little joke to cut the tenseness of me, to at least cut my tenseness. And this is my wife's joke, so it's pretty clean. She told me one day she come from the wire or some of her lady friends told her about this guy was all dressed up and he was walking in front of a house of prostitution. Back and forth, back and forth. Policeman came along and he says, "What's going on? What are you doing around here?" He says, "I'm waiting for my wife." Policeman says, "Do you know what kind of a place this is?" "Yes," he says. "It's a house of prostitution." "And you're waiting for your wife." He says, "Is your wife a prostitute?" He says, "No, she's a substitute." Well, we're all laughing together. I'm glad I got a little time because it takes me, like Churchill told Lady After, that he never heard anybody could say so many words to say nothing. And I have a habit of watching the clock and racing the clock, so I don't have to worry about that. I was born in Ireland, I'd guess, and I went to grade school only, so don't expect me to be a speaker or a thinker, and I think maybe that's why I'm here. Because I listened and I did what other people told me. And I know I was full of fears, even in school, and that's a very bad defect of character. And I also had the embarrassing job of going to the nearest village a couple of miles away to try to get my father home, because he would go on a binge about every 3 or 4 months for 5 or 6 days. And it was hell to get him away from those cronies he was drinking with, and he was dirty, he would fall down. It was very embarrassing. I was scared. I was sad for what he did to the home, to my mother. And he'd fall down and I'd look at him and I'd say, "No way am I going that way. No way, it'll never happen to me." I didn't even have to give it a second thought, I thought. And also another thing about his drinking problem, I think it brings out so well the difference between a problem drinker or an alcoholic drinker and a social drinker. Because if you put it all together, he didn't drink 3 weeks out of the year. And yet, every 3 months, you were going to be through this week and 3 or 4 days of recuperating every 3 months, and those 3 months rolled around too soon, and it was always at the wrong time and in the wrong place, and we were ashamed and embarrassed, and home was like a morgue over it. It was like a cloud that never lifted, even for the 2 or 3 months that you'd be dry. Anyhow, I'm going to get out of Ireland. I got out of there. I was 20 years of age in the boat coming over. I had no skills. I had no education. I was scarcely ever away from the little farm that we had or the little village that was closest to us. I was not prepared to make a living in a big city. But I had good relatives to come to. And I had an opportunity to learn the carpenter trade or to try to learn it. And I also learned to do a little drinking, never giving a thought to where it might lead me, that I might be down the same road as my father. And for the sake of time, I could really skip through about 11 years. And the only exciting thing is that I got married and had 3 children and liked to drink. I never missed work. I never missed meals, and I got always sleep. And I didn't realize that drinking was taking on a habit, and eventually a pretty hard habit. I wouldn't be drunk more than once or twice a year. And for those 11 years, there wasn't a day that I wasn't just thrilled emotionally with the thought of someday getting back to see my folks, see the old South and the neighbors and the rest of the family. And it didn't look like it was ever going to happen because I just got through learning my trade in the '29 crash, and I was fortunate again to be a janitor, flat buildings, the fire boilers and clean buildings and what have you. And that was a steady job, and I eventually had about a dozen buildings to get around, and I also had the saloon, or 2 or 3 of them, on each round eventually. I got a leave of absence, cashed in an insurance policy. My wife had taken a trip already, so I'm getting back to the old South to see my folks. A big dream was coming true. I was celebrating before I left. I was celebrating on the boat and over. I was drunk a couple of times a day on the boat because it's closed down at intervals. You always hit up with a drinking gang. And by the time I got to the old country and to my home, I was a pretty sad sack. Never felt like that before. Never drank so heavy. And I thought all these years how nice it would be to go to see my folks and be nice to them, have a nice visit, and bring them some gifts, be nice to them, make them proud of me. It never happened. Alcoholism is this kind of a thief, or it makes a thief out of the individual. Destroy that trip, it might do everything as well if I never made it. Because I was drunk every day, I was out with the gang, I was either too drunk, or too nervous, or too hungover to be in the presence of my parents. I would have avoided them more than anything else. I couldn't afford to buy them a gift. I needed the money to drink. It wasn't enough. I went over to Scotland to meet my wife's folks. I had never met any of them. And I tried to be good. But what I thought was good, they didn't think so much of it. I'll tell you why. I know. I went back 22 years later, and my sister-in-law, who I took back to Ireland with me, she just got out of school. She didn't know anybody there. And I was in the saloon for 2 or 3 hours, and she'd be waiting outside. The women didn't come in then, especially the young girls. And after 2 or 3 years, leaving her standing outside someplace, I'd be out there, come on, let's go. And the thing back of that, when I went back 22 years later, she was sweeping down the stairs. I'll never forget, she never missed a stroke with the broom. She never even looked up. She glared at the suitcase and she says, he's here again. I somehow got back between borrowing money to get back and so forth. You should see the mess of my wardrobe when I get back. And I thought in the back of my head, when I get back, I'll get up out of this. I'll get back on the job. I'll be back up where I used to be working, not missing meals, not missing sleep, doing a good job on the job. It never happened. I drank more, not as much as I did on the vacation, but I was drunk a couple of times a week. I was in and out of the tavern more often than I was in my own home. My job was steady, so I had credit. Kept going from bad to worse. My mother-in-law came out to visit with us. She found us in a basement apartment, which went with the job, and it wasn't such a downer in those days because very few people had a job. But we were in the basement apartment with 9 children. And she came out to visit her oldest daughter. This was a dream for her come true. She gathered up her pennies for years to make a visit to America and to see her daughter and the family, and me too. And one day, I saw her crying. I just come in out of the saloon, and of course, I wasn't aware of what she was aware of. That the marriage wasn't well, the home wasn't right, nothing was right. And I said to her, what's the matter? And she says, well, I feel lonesome for the family back home. I knew she was lying to save face for me. So I told her later, if you don't nag me, I'll quit drinking. And I was just as sincere when I told her that as I was the day I came to AA to stay. I stayed sober for 14 months. Along about Thanksgiving, some contractor around the building gave me a bottle of wine. I didn't need a drink for 14 months. An alcoholic never knows why the hell he needs a drink except just to keep him alive after a binge. And I had to drink that whole bottle before I went to bed. But being on the wagon had a little momentum. But now I've set up a little reward for myself so I can go on for another month or so. I'm going to drink at Christmas. I'm going to get off the wagon for good then. So I was looking forward to Christmas, to have a hell of a time. I started drinking at Christmas. I always had Christmas over before it got here. All I had ever was left was a hangover and sickness and looking for a drink. And I drank, and I was a whiskey drinker. I drank till March. And I stayed on the job. And it wasn't easy that time of the year, firing a dozen boilers and cleaning snow and building the garbage and what you have to do from 5 o'clock in the morning to 10 at night. It's difficult enough if you're in good shape. I got up against it. My brother was in the house at the time. He was an alcoholic. Spent a lot of time in Skid Row. I was really in bad shape, even that my wife had a little sympathy for me. And she said, why didn't you go to bed? And that Patty took care of the job for today. It was a Sunday. There wasn't so much to do on Sunday, only fire the boilers. I tried to go to bed because I didn't drink that day. I was trying to get off. I couldn't keep my head on the pillow 20 seconds. I got up and I passed out in the kitchen. And he went and he got a pint of whiskey. He knew what to do. I never got too used to the morning drink. He knew what to do, and he got a pint of whiskey and I drank half of that. And I went to the rectory. And I happened to see the good Monsignor for sale on the west side of Chicago in St. Mel's. He was a kind of a hard-nosed guy. I was cleaned up. I was really down physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and every other way, as I can explain it now. And I didn't tell him that I was suffering. I just asked him, do you think there's some way that I can carry on? And he said, why, certainly. He talked with a lot of authority. I thought that was somebody. He says, nobody has to suffer like that for their sins. It will beat the best man. He seemed to see right through me. And that made me think that he had some answers. And he says, you take a pledge and take it from me. And come and see me any time. You're not ready for it yet. And he said to my wife, give him a drink if he wants one. He's got a good spirit. My wife doesn't too liver with giving me a drink. I was really terrible shape, physically and mentally and spiritually, especially physically at the time. And I went 3 or 4 different days after that, and there were often, if you were looking for him, you couldn't find him, but I found him every time. I thought, that's something, really. That's quite a coincidence, if it is a coincidence. And he encouraged me and asked me if I was still in the job, and I said, yes, stay on it. And I battered around those 12 buildings for 12 days without eating or sleeping or a moment's peace of mind or rest, except whatever I could get in Franklin and frantic sobriety, they call it. I'd be frantic in midair someplace. I went and took the pledge after I saw him first, 3 or 4 days later. I went to take it, and I think he was testing me. He said, come back tomorrow. I said, right now. I was so determined. And believe me, I was so dramatic. And I don't think normally that I could ever have done this. The best days I ever saw. And it was like the good Lord was lifting my feet and letting them down again. At times I felt that way. I still don't discard that. And I took the pledge, and I got the DTs, and I felt there wasn't another one in this whole world like me that could have any answer for me, that could have any understanding for me. As bad a shape as I was in, I think I could have walked to Washington to find an answer, one step after the other. I had the motivation at the time and the willingness to challenge the dilemma, because I didn't understand what the hell was wrong with me. Instead of thinking of this way because I drank too much, I thought because I can't have my drinks cruise, there was a lot of other things wrong with me. And so I got through the DTs. I can't explain what I went through physically and emotionally. I won't try. But I had to pull myself together with a prayer on my lips every given moment, because all I knew, the only place I knew to look for answers was in religion. And my brother even said to me, you know, religious insanity is the most serious insanity of all. There was nothing else. And I could brace myself and pull myself together to fix the fire in a particular building. When I went to the next one, I forgot I was in the last one. I put 10 times more effort into making sure that things were done than was necessary ordinarily. But then there was nothing else to do because I couldn't sit or rest or anything else, and I just kept going round and round. When I met someone, I made some excuse to get away from them. I locked the basement when I went in there, and believe me, I got through without a complaint in the job, which I would usually get if I wasn't drinking at all. After that year, I went back to drinking again. And I did the same for 2 or 3 more months. But I didn't let myself get in such a hassle again, because I knew what I was getting into. So as much as I hated to go back on the wagon and take a pledge, I did it anyhow. Did that 3 different times. I went to church every morning. I stopped in the afternoon to what we now call our quiet time. I got pretty well, I thought. I got the bills paid up. Home was pretty good. Kids were all right, the wife. And then I think I'm going to go back and drink. You know, and I justified it, rationalized. Most of these other guys that I drank with couldn't do this. Here I'm able to stay away for a whole year. Why the hell can I go back and drink it better than any? It never worked. The first time back, I knew I was in the soup. The second back, second day I was sure. And that's all over again. This went on for about 3 years. You know that when I went through that first emotional crisis, the DTs and on the job, I know I was putting my life on the line, that I could have died in the effort. And only if I was basically healthy, I would have. You know, I think it tells me sometimes, you say you can get off any place you want to and any time you want to. You don't have to go to the end of the line. I only speak for me. I had to go to the end of the line. And you know when the end of the line comes? When I thought I was ready to put my life on the line to find an answer to this dilemma? 10 years later. Broken pledges, broken bones, car wrecks, and what have you. And one day I was recovering from an injury. I wasn't able to be on the job. I was doing a side job for a guy that was an AA. He was half in and half out. But he was good enough to invite a friend of his, who was a good AA, over to the house. And he must have told him that I was drinking too much because I didn't even show up for that job every day. And this good friend was in the real estate business. I'd never met him before. He was carrying the message, I didn't know it. He told me his story. He never asked me if I had a drinking problem, just told me his story. And when he finished, before they left, he said, "Barney, if you think you ever need us, we'll be here." I went to a couple of meetings about that time, and to show you one guy carrying the message and the other guy not, and I'm not saying this in criticism or mentioning names, I went to this guy's house to do a little bit of the job on a meeting night, and he kind of influenced me to stay and work instead of go to the meeting, which I was just happy to do. I kept on drinking for 2 more years. When I went to those couple of meetings, I felt sorry for those guys. Of course, this was a con job that I brainwashed myself into thinking. They're hiding from society. They're hiding from the human race. They're just dry. I heard them talk about inventories and confessions to another person and all this and that. And I said, where the hell have these people been? I've been examining my conscience and going to confessions and all this and that for years. They're just outside the church someplace. I'm going back to the normal guys and do some more drinking. 2 more years elapsed before I went to a party one night with the president of the Carpenters National District Council. There was lots of booze there. I was drinking most of the day. I had to go and get a couple more on the way with my wife. And how other people put up with me was more than I know. But what the hell is she going to do with a bunch of kids? There was no welfare. For about 3 months already, I know I'm in the soup. I know there's no answers for me. I know I'm in the pit, and I'm not getting out. I tried everything. Nothing works. I have no self-worth whatsoever. And the next morning, I refused to go to work. Not that I didn't go days when I was in as bad a shape physically. And I wouldn't even go with the idea of getting a couple of dollars so that I could have a couple of drinks. I knew the jig was up. At the end of the line, it was so clear to me that there was no use of lying to myself, conning myself, or kidding myself. There was no way to turn the wheels again. I crawled out of the pits, which to others might not seem so deep, but to me, I couldn't get out of it. Every time I got up, I fell further back in. I never got up as far. What the hell's the use? It's futile. I know I'm beat completely. I also knew that AA wouldn't work for me. And I would like especially to reach out to those who are struggling, uptight, discouraged, or new, or sure that ones who are sure that AA won't work for them or think it won't. But I knew that I would go back anyhow, even if it wouldn't work. And I went and lay in that bed all day, and I called this guy, or my wife called him, and he told me to meet him downtown that night. It was a Tuesday night in Chicago's Loop. There was about 150 at the meeting. And I was running alongside of this guy just like a nervous pup. He was sober 6 or 7 years. He seemed like about 9 feet tall and looked like he never had a drink in his life. And he made me acquainted with some guy and told him I was new. And the guy said to me, "You are my insurance." I didn't have the least idea. I thought I'm a hell of an insurance for anybody. But I've learned since what insurance the newer guy can be to any of us, and what each of us can be to each other. There was 3 speakers there, 2 men and a lady. If there's such a thing as a lady alcoholic, I don't know, but there was 2 men and a lady. And I heard one guy calling himself a rat. He must have been taking the 5th step. That's the only words I remember out of the whole meeting. But when the woman was the last speaker, and by then I was able to concentrate a little bit, and I could realize that she had been where I was at now. But that didn't help. I could find those kind of people in Skid Row. But she was also recovering. She was recovering to the point where she was able to take care of her family, where she had to go to meetings, where she had some gratitude for what she had received and what had been taken away from her. And I got a little hope. Maybe this would work for me, just maybe, just a faint maybe, a faint hope. But you know, Bill Wilson didn't have much to start with either, not comparing myself with him. But he had some kind of a revelation, an experience, coming out of the DTs after the doctor attended to him. And his wife said, "It's too bad something can't be done for Bill, such a fine man otherwise." I couldn't say that about me. Anyway, the doctor says we've done all we can. It's in God's hands. And Bill called him back and told him what experience he had, and he told him to hang on to it. Whatever it is, it's more than we've got. And that little hope is more than I had for a long time. And I knew, as difficult as it was, in spite of all the nervousness, frustration, and problems at home, and problems on the job, and especially the little or no self-worth that I had, to hang on to that little hope was like holding on to a candle in a cyclone. But I did. I can say a lot of things have happened in my life, even tragedies, that I've never been out without hope since. No matter if I was full of resentments, or fears or what, I always had hope. And when I think of what I was like, and Bill here last night, I think, asked me that he would like, he knew I was around for a while, and he would like me to come out. I can say a lot of things have happened in my life, even tragedies, that I've never been out without hope since. No matter if I was full of resentments, or fears or what, I always had hope. And when I think of what I was like, and Bill here last night, I think, asked me that he would like, he knew I was around for a while, and he would like me to come out and tell some of you people how I stayed in there so long. I think of the hell of a price that we pay to get here. All the sickness and all the failures and all the remorse, the job losses or the threats of losses, the worries, what we've done to ourselves, what I've done to myself, what I've done to others, especially my family. That's the price I paid to get here. The guy up in Wisconsin put it very well. He said, I don't regret one day that I spent in jail, one job that I lost, one hangover I had. And compared with me, the way I was and what I thought about myself, I wasn't this high. They give me an inferiority complex. They already had one, but they made it worse. Until we would sit down around the table and they would tell their different stories. Then they talk about the steps. They needed the steps the same as I did. They had a change. I was waiting for somebody to say, I never had her together. I was waiting to find something like that I could identify with. Because looking back, I know there was a lot of things wrong with me from the beginning, as I remember. I know now, through what AA has taught me, that I didn't have enough going for me to ever make a life for myself or anyone else. That I was telling, scaring, and immature. No sense of values, no sense of direction, no order in my life, no discipline. Where the hell was I going? Naturally, I went to the booze. And I had all these defects of character, probably before I ever took a drink. But when I drank, they came out of the closets. And they run my life. And with alcoholism, which is more than just drinking, it's our thinking, it's our whole makeup, I became bankrupt. Now, I'm not afraid to say that I never was on a solid road in my whole life. Nobody could have told me that then. It would have been a fight. What AA has done for me I couldn't have found in any school or university in the world, or no other teacher in the world that could have given it to me, except you people. And sometimes I'm afraid a new person might get confused, like I did, when I came all confused and messed up, and recently been to church a couple of times a day, and they were talking about God. It turned me off. And I hear people say, and of course, It's my own interpretation. That God is keeping me sober. Well, if that's so, what are we doing here? I really cherish this fellowship because before I could understand anything about God, and I had tried hard, this fellowship took me in and stayed with me, and they told me that there was hope for me, that if they could make it, why couldn't I? That's what I'm trying to tell somebody out here tonight. And that's why I'm turning myself inside out tonight, so that the struggling, or the ones uptight, or the ones that are new, or the ones that think AA won't work for them, I'm telling them in all these words that if it were for me, why wouldn't it work for you? Stay in AA till you're sure it won't work, and if you do that, you'll never leave. And like I say, we're able to live in 48 months out of the year and come back up when we feel like it. I'm a grandfather, and something else a little later. I never would have lived to see that day. I never remembered any grandparents on my side. When I was a youngster in school, I envied kids that were going to spend the weekend with their grandparents because they were always nicer. I never remembered any grandparents, neither does my wife. And I was down the drain before any of my family was married. Though I don't think there was any grandchildren around before that. If there was, they didn't tell me. So, three years ago, this is not telling you about me or what I did. It's telling you about what AA has made possible and brought about. We had our 50th wedding anniversary. This guy that lay in that bed of despair and felt there was no hope in God's world for him was in the same home with his wife and family and knew he didn't belong to them, or couldn't be a part of them, or couldn't be of any use to them or himself. The best thing I brought to AA, the best knowledge that I brought, is that I was completely beat, completely defeated, and I was willing to ask for help, and I was willing to listen, and I was willing to go to meetings and do what they told me as well as I could. And this same guy that was helpless and hopeless, and only by example that I got a little hope myself from that lady speaker. Her words wouldn't have meant anything. I saw where she had been at and how she was coming back, what AA was doing for her. 3 years ago we had our 50th wedding anniversary. It was the party of parties, I tell you. There was an AA priest in the altar. There was 3 of them in the altar. All the grandchildren were there. My family did everything but offer the mass. They did all the talking and what have you, and one avoided to give a sermon, if you want to call it that. There were about 150 people in the church, or 200. And I didn't know that he was going to even speak. He told about his mother, about the busy life that she had, difficult life that she had. And he said he didn't give her much thought until he had a family himself. And then he realized what she went through. And he said, my father, the going got kind of rough for him, and he started to do a bit of drinking. And he joined AA. That's the only thing he said about my drinking. And he said, he made me out like I was blowing all over the place, serving people out. That's Didn't know I was running all over the place. In that church, especially some widowed mothers who had sons in AA that I met there, and I wouldn't come home and tell my wife or anybody in the family that I met them there, and they wouldn't go home and tell their mother that I was there. And this is the first time they knew that their sons weren't alone, that Barney was in it too. We had a terrific wedding anniversary. There's many AAs were there, and their wives or families. There's nobody outside of them in that room realized that but for AA, it could never have happened. We didn't realize that only for AA, Barney would have probably died a drunk, just like his brother, whose family left him and back to the old country. Him and I stayed sober for a whole year, leaning on one another, helping one another. We had something, but not enough. Because he just got as far as New York on his way back to try to catch up with his family when he got drunk and got robbed, what have you. He got back to the family, he was drinking. We couldn't put up with him. He went over to Scotland and was found dead in an outhouse with acute alcoholism. Nobody could realize except AAs that something like that would have happened to me. You still don't talk about him among his family. They don't hold it against him. They're more informed about alcoholism now. But still, there's no good memories to talk about him, so you don't say anything. Instead of where I'm at today, in 33 years, a day at a time, with a good life, with its ups and downs, I would have been also just a memory and not a good one. Now, a few more things to say when I'm going to go to bed. But I thank God, first of all, I thank for the fellowship, because they're the ones that rescued me. But as far as I'm concerned, the higher power, as God as I call him, and the fellowship, and the program, 12 steps, 12 traditions, are a whole package deal. And well, I've learned that one doesn't work without the other. And to really get into the meat of this program, you have to have an attitude of concern for the other guy. There's plenty of opportunities. Since self-centeredness and selfishness as the roots of the problem, as far as the founders could discover, there's great opportunities here to do something about that. You can't reach out to be concerned with another person or be big enough to give them a hand and still be thinking about yourself. That's the real medicine. That's the medicine to get well, and it's the medicine to stay well. And it's the medicine to get us back if we get off base. Everything isn't always going to be rosy. In 1973, I went back to Ireland. I wasn't even up to where my family lives yet, till I got a message in Limerick. I was staying with a little AA there that was in our house many times. I got a message to call Chicago. When I called, I found out my 24-year-old son, my seventh son, was drowned. I was back the same day. That was really tragic, difficult, but it could have been worse. Because but for AA, and what sobriety I had, and what help had been given to me, I didn't drink, or I may never have gotten back. I've been crippling around for the last year with a deteriorated hip. The few doctors didn't know what was the matter with me. I just had surgery about 3 months ago. New hip. Usually we're down in Florida a couple of months ago. I was calling people on the 20th of October, some friends in Florida, and calling some friends to meet us at the airport. At the same time, my wife was going through a routine operation, a routine examination, and discovered a malignancy in her breast. And she was operated on that. And those are downers, but we have an awful lot to be thankful for. She doesn't have to have any treatments. The operation was very successful. She could go to Florida tomorrow and forget about the doctors, which were going very soon. Last Sunday morning, I was sitting at a table with 6 of us. I'm not a guy that looks for these kind of things. I was there. In the old days, I could be feeling sorry for myself. I'm in the worst case. A friend of mine that worked with me for 15 years, 25 years younger than me, come in there on 2 canes. Scarcely any power in his legs. There was another guy that had buried his wife a week ago. So we never know who's got problems, who needs a little special hand. But the day at a time, like the guy told me, that's the way of life from now on, as best we can. It's not always easy to handle it like that. But when I used to be all screwed up, no matter where I went, I was screwed up. Now if I get screwed up, I know I have some place to get back to base, and get back to a meeting, and get back to helping somebody that hasn't been around perhaps for a while. When I had this pain in my hip in Florida and also a pinched nerve in my back, I went to a meeting one night. There's a big room bigger than this, and they had 4 or 5 meetings going on in different corners. Said to my friend, he was around a while too, which meeting would we go to? He says, we go to the beginners meeting. It's a good idea. There's always somebody there you can surely say something will help. There was a young lad come in there, and he looked about half put together, looked very delicate. One sleeve was hanging loose. He was very frail. Myself and the other guy says, any of you guys that want our phone numbers, you can have it. When we come out of the meeting, he came to me and asked me if we could have my phone number, and I said, sure. The guy had his arm sliced off of the shoulder with cancer. His teeth never grew in right. He had a vest on him with an arm sleeve on it. And that guy made me ashamed as much pain as I was in to think about myself. And believe me, I needed something like that at the time. Not that I ever think about taking a drink, but it's hard to put up with these things sometimes. And I took him to some meetings, and one day there was a few of his friends doing a little job, and he said, do you want a hand? And threw the false hand off at me. I thank you. I have talked long enough. I do hope. I'm not a speaker, but I certainly would be amiss if I didn't retain a little bit of all that's been given to me. And also amiss if I can't give back a little bit of it. It would be wasted on me. I hope I have helped somebody out there. In any good meeting, or any speaker who can say something that will help another person to go home here with a little more hope, with a little more determination, with a little more faith that AA will work for them. It's a good meeting. Evening. And a guy give me these 3 lines. I always like to retain them. I don't say them quite the same way. But it says, I sought my soul, I could not see. I sought my God, he evaded me. I sought another alcoholic and found all 3. I want to thank you all. I want to thank those who are responsible for having me here. I want to thank you for listening, and God bless you all. I expect to be here pretty often next summer. This is my first time here, but I spend a lot of time out here in the suburbs. I got a daughter in Western Springs. I got one in Clarendon Hills. I got one in Riverside. And I might just tell you about the family. And I think, if I was going along with my head down, either drunk or with a hangover, and all these kids coming into work, and naturally, I'm afraid, I think they're all going to be like me. What else can I think? Well, I got one boy who was a top electrician. I got one a police sergeant. I got 2 lawyers. Dick knows all of them down there. 2 lawyers, an FBI agent. And I got one in transportation. I'll get back to him. I got a girl in the religious life. I got 4 that are well married, and I got one that's well separated. And this one who was in transportation, up until lately, he was driving a cab to keep body and soul together some of the time with the help that he gets from others. Because he's got this disease. I can't tell him that. The family can't tell him it, though I've had him to a few meetings some time ago. He's been in and out of institutions. He was probably one of the smartest boys in the family. Maybe too smart. They say this is not a way of life for thinkers. People think themselves out of this. They think themselves to stay away from it. They're not ready to listen and go along and take advice and use other people's thinking since they've known them so bad for so long. He hasn't taken a drink, I believe, for maybe 3 years. But the other 2/3 of the disease is there. And I don't need him, of course. I've been around long enough to know that this is mental and spiritual and physical and emotional. And he's very miserable and really not well with it. And I'm sorry about that. All we can do is pray for somebody like him, and don't shortchange those prayers. Don't think too little. It can eventually do wonders. I have to put them in God's hands as well as I can. I have to put myself there. We know very well when they talk about it being mental and spiritual and physical. I can even look back before I get into excessive drinking. I'm looking back with 20/20 hindsight. That I didn't have enough going for me mentally That's too negative. You don't have to be crazy to be an alcoholic mess. Just if your thinking is negative, it's no match for alcoholism. And the spiritual qualities really weren't there. I was a churchgoer. I believed in the religion, but lived in the opposite way. I have no quarrel with the second step whatsoever. The best way that I can prove to myself that I needed the second step or be restored to sanity or to common sense is to think of what I did with my life. Think of the mess I was making of it. And not only that, justifying it. It's a disease of denial. Denial that I'm destroying myself and hurting and killing everything around me. If that's not crazy, I don't know what hell is. There sure isn't much good thinking or spirituality within a person when he's on a route like this. I want to again thank you. God bless you.